All right, so the book has now been out long enough that we get to ask you about the reaction to the book, because I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been quite intense, including from the subject of the book, former President Joe Biden,
Who, just in case you didn't know, said that he could beat us up.
That was my first question, because I looked at that clip and he was like, they didn't mention you guys.
No.
The reporter
didn't mention us or the book.
They didn't mention you guys or the book. They just asked about the discussion about his mental capabilities, and Biden responded, "You can see that I'm mentally incompetent, I can't walk, and I could beat the hell out of both of them."
I saw that live, and I immediately texted you. I said, "I think Biden just said he could beat you up."
Yeah, I first heard it from you.
I think you're the both of them, because you're not referenced. You're not referenced in any way.
It was unclear if it was simultaneously or one after the other.
I think it's like the one gorilla versus 100 men kind of situation.
Did you
Kill Bill
guys
asked-
take that to be you? I don't know who else it could have been, but
I took it to be us. Yes,
Yeah.
I took it to be us.
other Bidens have also weighed in on the book. His children, Hunter and Ashley, one of his granddaughters, Naomi. But there's one official response from a Biden spokesperson that's in almost every single story about the book. They haven't changed it. We continue to await anything that shows where Joe Biden had to make a presidential decision or where national security was threatened or where he was unable to do his job. In fact, the evidence points to the opposite. He was a very effective president. What do you guys think of that response?
Well, so that was the response that they gave before the book was released.
Yeah.
And I said at the time, okay, wait until you read it, and you'll get you'll have to change that statement, but they have not. And the truth of the matter is that the book has any number of moments where one can wonder if whatever issues he was having did actually affect his ability to do the presidency in the way that we would want. And there was actually an essay about this in Slate today about one of the anecdotes that I found most disturbing, which was Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado goes to the White House in June 2024 before the debate, and it's an immigration event, and Biden has a very unsettling kind of moment where he seems to have some sort of neurological episode in front of the cameras. Very quick, but he's like talking and nobody can understand what he's saying. And it's not that thing he does when he whispers to make a point. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's if you couldn't hear that, that's that thing he does when he whispers to make a point. Watch me. Yeah. Nobody's saying. Yes. Anyway, it's not that. These mics aren't Biden level mics. But it's he's having some moment. It's like some weird thing, and Senator Bennet leaves the White House and thinks to himself, this is why our immigration policy is such a mess, because the commander-in-chief can't manage the portfolio. He can't handle it. He can't tell people what to do because he's not able to be engaged the way that, whether or not you like his policies, and I imagine this crowd doesn't, Trump or Obama or other presidents have been able to. And in fact, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was waiting at the very beginning of the Biden presidency for the order to do more border enforcement, which would be a Biden-esque way to do the job or an Obama-esque way to do the job, and the order never came. So there are, in the book, moments of people wondering if he's not able to do the job.
I want to step back and talk about how you guys went about writing this book. Just for people who don't know how a book like this comes together, could you talk a bit about your reporting process, the sourcing, verifying anecdotes and recollections, the fact-checking and all that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's like, well, now you tell us, I don't blame them for feeling that way. But the truth is that this book came about, almost every single interview of the over 200 was done after November 5th. The origins of it actually are, I was on Jake's show the day before the election. He said, I think Kamala Harris might lose. And I've been thinking about this book where we examine how the Democratic Party allowed Trump to come back. Would you be interested? And like Jake and I were friendly, but we weren't like, let's write a book friendly. And so I was like,
Buy me dinner first, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, sure, okay, whatever. And then didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And then sure enough, Jake sends me a draft of a book proposal the night of November 6th. And we turned in and we did all those interviews. Finally, people that we had been cold calling, sliding into their DMs for like 4 years that never wanted to talk. Or if they did talk, they weren't exactly candid, because I think there was this, and we can talk more about this gripping fear that saying anything would ultimately help Donald Trump and not change Joe Biden's mind. Now that was over, and people were willing to finally confide, small episodes that they had seen that troubled them, that they sort of dismissed as perhaps one-offs, and were willing to sort of take us behind the scenes. Now, many of those people are still anonymous. We every single time we always try to get people on the record. Sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. But that's why we interviewed over 200 people, because even when they're anonymous, you need more corroboration.
Yeah, and just because this is the writer's block and this is Los Angeles, where even bus drivers have screenplays, so I'll give you just the idea of some of the writer stuff we did. For me, just as a writer, this is my 7th book, and structure is like the most important thing for me. I'm sure everybody here knows that George R.R. Martin from the Game of Thrones books says that there are gardeners and there are architects, and I'm definitely an architect, that you need to build the house and then you fill in the rooms. And so we started with the structure, like here are what I think the chapters should be. Alex and I went back and forth and figured that out. Here are all the people we want to interview, and then we would just write chapters. And when they were done, they weren't done, but we would just like fill in the rooms and then go back. And the biggest disagreement we had, this is a very gratifying, pleasant, professional relationship, but the biggest disagreement we had was Google Docs versus Word. And
Let me guess, you were the Word guy.
yes, I'm the Word guy.
Absolutely. Listen,
Same.
we wrote the.
I'm as a
You're
Word guy.
I'm a Google Doc guy.
Oh, thank God. Listen, we had to write the entire book in one Word document that we emailed back and forth. It wasn't even by chapters.
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
Jake's doing smoke signals, sending his horse and buggy out with the
Exactly.
latest edition.
And as the millennial, I'm like honestly, my Command S buttons don't even work anymore. So I was like frantically trying to save the document because it doesn't auto save like Google Docs.
So just we started with Google Docs. Okay, I'm not against Google Docs.
Some people are saying that maybe you were saying you were okay with Google Docs, but maybe behind the scenes weren't as capable with Google Docs. That there's some evidence that maybe you'd lost a step with Google Docs.
True, it's true.
You can't point to any evidence.
This is a cover-up.
So, but I will say this. So we had a list of 200 plus people that we wanted to interview, and we interviewed almost every single person. Google Docs stops at 100, right? So at the next time we had 2 different lists of Google Docs. This is too much in the Google Docs weeds, but
He couldn't handle
think
the
it's
second
important.
Google
the
Doc.
fact that there was a second Google anyway.
Yeah,
That's when we
the
switched to
second
Word.
Google Doc. So the book. You were talking about this, that before the election, before Joe Biden steps aside, there's this incredible fear, right? And this is not a kind of mercenary or kind of political. It's a genuine concern for the country. That if you have concerns about Joe Biden's age and you go public with those concerns, that might hurt him. He's not stepping aside. You've done nothing to make our situation better. You've made Donald Trump's situation better. What is the logic after the election for people to still be afraid to speak honestly about this? Including in the book, you make reference to people who were publicly defending Biden, I believe to this day, while talking to you behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And you could tell us who they are.
Well, you definitely know who they are, but you don't know who they are. So I think that there is still a tremendous amount of fear about the anger of the Biden campaign. I mean, it is odd to be attacked by Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Ashley Biden, Naomi Biden. I guess there's a wife and maybe like 6 grandkids that we're waiting for before we get the whole
crew,
whole set.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not pleasant. And then, the Democratic Party it's not like everybody. I mean, I think that the book has changed the conversation where people just now accept that what we're saying is true. I mean, you guys were there last year, but a lot of people were very reluctant to acknowledge this. I think the book has changed the conversation, but it's not as though the 2028 candidates are running out there, like holding the book up and saying like, we need to deal with this as a party. I mean,
Yeah.
people are still in denial about it.
Yeah. I mean, you guys use, obviously, the word cover up in the title, provocative, intentionally, I'm sure. What I have always tried to figure out is, and I know you guys have said that some of the people you talk to, some of the people in that inner circle, like genuinely believe he's fine, or at least you leave open the fact that. So, is it a cover up if they are genuinely thinking everyone else is crazy, we're around him all the time, we think he's fine, even if we all see something different?
It's a great question, and the reason why we use cover-up is because, listen, everyone knew Joe Biden was old. Everyone saw it. The polling displayed it. But even with people recognizing he was old, the Joe Biden we saw on the debate stage was still very shocking to tens of millions of people. And the reason it was shocking, and I think the book really shows this, is that debate Biden, for lack of a better term, that was not the first or even close to the first time he had acted that way behind the scenes. And there were active, even if they would not acknowledge it to themselves, by their very actions, they were trying to hide and conceal Joe Biden from acting like that in public, from members of their own cabinet, from members of the Democratic Party, from members of Congress. And those efforts became increasingly frantic the 6 to 8 months before the debate. Now, your other question of, well, if they don't know they're covering it up, if they're not cognizant, is it a cover-up? You know, by very virtue, you know, one like quick example, if you saw Joe Biden and Jill Biden on The View just like 2 weeks ago, you know, she's doing what she has been doing for the last year and a half, which is she sort of helps him out when he's like struggling. She'll jump in and like sort of complete his sentences. No, I'm sure she'll say he's fine, he's great. But by her very actions, she is showing that she recognizes that he needs her to pick up she is trying to pick up his slack.
I think actually that the statement that they've given suggests that they know he couldn't do the job 24/7. They don't dispute. I mean, what we have in the book, I don't know how many people have actually read the book, but what we have in the book is, these aren't like our conclusions based on like what, you know, our view watching TV. This is based on, you know, more than 200 interviews with cabinet officials, members of Congress, fundraisers, donors, you know, people who saw him up close, who told us their stories. So when cabinet secretaries tell us that by the end of the Biden presidency, he could not be relied upon for that proverbial 2 a.m. phone call in the middle of the night with a national security emergency, I mean, that's a big deal. That means he can't do the job of president. That's what it means. I mean, that's what the job is. I'm old enough to remember when Hillary was running ads against Obama in Texas, saying that he couldn't be relied upon to do that because he was so inexperienced. I'm sure that's seared into your brain. And John, you probably wrote those ads for Hillary.
It was a good ad. It was a good ad.
Love it. Love
was
it.
a
Mark
good
Penn,
ad.
we're just writing it together.
It was a good ad. Good ads don't always work. Every losing campaign isn't wrong about everything.
But he couldn't be counted on. He couldn't be counted on for that. And their answer, like, they don't say in their statement, you know, it's not true that he lost his train of thought in uncomfortable ways. It's not true that he didn't recall the name of his national security advisor. It's not true that he couldn't be relied upon for the 2 a.m. phone call. They say, and his decisions were fine, and you can't point to any evidence as to otherwise. And I mean, yeah, I can, but that's not even the point. You're kind of granting the whole premise of the book.
Yeah, it's sort of it does sort of raise the question. Well, what does it mean to be up to the job, right? And what do we require of this person in this sort of unique role that they play? Because I can see how you could say both statements are true. You have this image of what a president does, and it's in the room making a decision. 7 people around a table, they're presenting options. Maybe they disagree, maybe they don't, and you say go, or you say yes, or you say no. And even in the book, you acknowledge that when Joe Biden is in control of the schedule, when it's at his time, at his choosing, he is can do that task, right? But the Bennett example is something else, which is a harder to measure thing. That part of the job of being president is over time taking in information from a bunch of different people, synthesizing it, moving a debate forward. That's never a decision, right? That he can no longer have that capacity, in part because of his declining ability to communicate, while still meeting that kind of decision-making in a meeting threshold. And by the way, I believe people in his, maybe it's Jake Sullivan or Tony Blinken have said that they did have the 2 a.m. moment with him, and they did feel like he was up to doing that.
Yeah, and I think your point of like what is the job of a president is a good one. And so let's say we have senior officials that say that if the job is making decisions and communicating, he was clearly not able to do the latter for most of the 4 years, and it got worse. But also, what's sort of striking about their argument is they are saying, yes, he could no longer communicate. Yes, he would ramble and stumble in meetings. Yes, his schedule was often limited from 10 to 4. His energy would be bad. When he got tired, he became unfocused. But we swear that it never affected, and all those things that are signs of like decline or aging never affected his decision making, which, I mean, they don't know.
Yeah. So let me just point to some decisions that he made that we wonder about. Okay, first of all, there's the immigration that Senator Bennett wonders about, and I think that is a fair argument to make, because that is about managing. I mean, Barack Obama was, he pushed for immigration reform, but he also, kept a strict border and deported a lot of people. He got a lot of flack for that, as you recall. He also got reelected. So I mean,
but I do think on that one, we could have a whole conversation about the immigration stance of the Democratic Party and how it evolved over the years. But I do think like the die was cast in the 2020 primary when every candidate was like, yeah, we'll decriminalize border crossings. Except for Biden. But look, how much was Biden involved and how much not? Like, where's the staff? Although
that's the point. That's what we're saying.
But I'm saying is what's surprising about the immigration thing is the closest aides around him are like pretty moderate Democrats, right? It's not like a bunch of
I don't know about Ron Klain, though. Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff for the first couple of years, became this, even though his roots were in like new conservative Democrats like Al Gore, he became the hero to the progressives. He did. I think there's an argument to be made that he steered the ship of state to the left.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I don't know how aware President Biden was that there were criticisms from people like Larry Summers or Jason Furman that they were putting too much money into the economy and it was going to be inflationary. I don't know. And now that's I'm not proving it, but I just don't know. I don't know. We have no reporting that suggests that the decisions he made about Afghanistan in 2021 were rooted in anything other than his fierce determinative belief that he was right about Afghanistan and that Obama and the generals were wrong.
Yes.
Okay, but I don't know what information he was capable of absorbing and synthesizing, as you say, and on and on.
Well, I also, part of this, though, is what I realized, and I realized in stark relief when reading the book as well, is, in the same way that I think people around Biden who do not, to this day, believe they were part of a cover-up, one piece of evidence being they thought he was going to win the debate. They put him out there, but that over time being around someone, your baseline moves, my baseline moves, right? Because let's say we disagree, and actually I do think Biden's decision-making was up to snuff, and I don't believe his actual capacity to make governing decisions was impacted. Part of the job of president is persuading people to come along. If you are unable to persuade people to the correctness of your views, to build a coalition either in Congress or amongst the public, you're weaker, you can't get things done, you can't achieve the goals you're trying to achieve. And even Democrats who were making this argument, that I was among them for a time, that no, you can't, you may have questions about his ability to communicate, but these right-wing fear-mongering about dementia and that he's not doing the job, that's unfair. He's able to do the job of president, but I was accepting less from a president. I didn't realize the cost of having the bully pulpit basically empty.
Yeah, I mean, ever since television was invented, communication is just an essential part of the job. And you could say like that's not fair or that shouldn't matter, but it just does.
Yeah. And the bar was lowered like gradually, because I remember when he gave the State of the Union in February of 2023, and I remember watching that State of the Union without looking at Twitter and at the reaction. I'm just like, how do I think he's doing? And I was like, he got through it. He's okay. And then I turned to the coverage, or at least like social media, and everyone was like, that was amazing, he's great. And I'm like, he was good, like he didn't have any stumbles, and he was like quick on his feet to like joust with the Republicans, but it wasn't like great. And then you think to yourself, and you guys talk about this in the book a lot, that there's the Bidenness, right? Which is Joe Biden forever, when he was much younger, was still long-winded, gives very long answers, tells stories, very gaffe prone. And so as he gets older, and especially as he gets into this term as president, you're like, is that just Joe Biden being the typical Joe Biden who tells really long stories, stumbles, gaffes that he's been doing forever, or is it something else? And I do think it was legitimately difficult to figure that out for a while.
So I'm from Philadelphia, so Joe Biden has been on my TV since I was 3. Because Delaware is such a small state, they don't have a media market, they rely on ours.
A lot of toll booths, but no media market.
Yeah. And so the very first, I was a cartoonist in college, and the very first cartoon I did for the Daily Dartmouth was making fun of Joe Biden for his plagiarism scandal. So this is somebody.
So you've
had it out for him forever.
Yes.
No, it's just.
This is actually new information to me.
When I worked for Salon.com, I interviewed, or I was part of a briefing that he did in 2001. So I've been aware of this guy for a long, long time. And the Bidenness, and this is in the book, and it's an important part of, not to let anybody off the hook, but it's an important part of why for some people it was difficult to understand what was going on with him, is that he's always been long-winded. He's always told long, pointless stories. He's always been a blowhard, and he's always been gaffe-prone. And in fact, it's really remarkable the degree to which his vice presidential staff reinvented him as the cool, avuncular uncle with the aviators and the ice cream and the Camaro. This crowd looks like they're at least my age. And so, like, there was a time when he was just kind of known as a blowhard senator. In fact, not to bring up another uncomfortable moment from the Obama campaign, but here I go.
Jake's memory, if only there was some way we could harness it to generate some sort of renewable energy.
Well, I was going to say, you can buy original sin now.
Profile of Barack Obama in Rolling Stone magazine in 2007 or 2008, and there is a moment where Barack Obama is sitting at a hearing, and the chairman of the committee, unnamed, is speaking, and blah, 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 and Barack Obama writes on a piece of paper and hands it to Robert Gibbs, "Shoot me now."
Yeah,
I remember.
Who's the chairman and what's the committee?
Yeah.
Joe
Yeah.
Biden, Senate Foreign Relations.
Well, and look, that had been my impression of Joe Biden until he was vice president and we
He
all
was a
worked in
great
the White
vice
House.
president, and the image was recreated, yeah.
I do think there was part of him that was like, he did want to show some discipline as vice president. He had ascended to this role, and he's just, I mean, for all the blowhard and the stories, he was also like such a good human being, and he was like very grounded. And I think the relationship, and we can talk about where it ended up, but the relationship between he and Obama, which started as, okay, this is a partnership, it makes sense to you, they became really, really close by the end of those 4 years. And then I think beyond that, we all know what happened. But
Yeah, no, but my point is just that Bidenness. In the book, we have aides who are like, well, is he just telling a story like he always does, or is this something else? Is he just being completely inappropriate because he's 79, or has he always been completely inappropriate? We have one European leader sitting down, having a meeting with Biden during his presidency, and Biden just blah, 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 and like completely misses the brief, does not talk about what he's supposed to. And this leader says something, but he's always been a bit like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So it was not necessarily, people didn't notice it at first.
Well, and this is, I mean, in some, like, this story is very familiar, I think, to basically everybody who has an aging relative, right? And, is the relative doing X because there's something off, or just because they're just being themselves and they're just older, but in this case, it happened on the largest stage with like potential consequences for all of us. And that's also, I mean, we're poking fun at him a little bit, but that's why we frame the book as a tragedy, because he is a good, I mean, by all like he is a good man and a well-intentioned one, and he was undone by both power, his own ego, and his own, like, I think in some ways a virtue of never giving up that became sort of a tragic vice.
Well, there's also, I think there's a more generous version of Bidenness too, which is something I felt even in the days after the debate, which is part of why I think we would watch that State of the Union or other big Biden moments and feel like, am I misreading this? Is he doing better than I feel? Is because even in past debates, there was a sense that, the people that are hyper engaged in politics, people that have maybe been writers in their lives, watch it in a different way, in a more kind of persnickety and like the Russian judges. Kind of grading on points, watching for style, are they already know what Biden thinks, they already know his policy views, so they're watching the language, they're watching the stumbles, but people that are just trying to understand what he stands for and what he believes and who he is as a person aren't feeling that. And the other part of this too is he was underestimated. That's a wrong claim point.
Throughout his life.
Throughout his life, and as a candidate, that he was underestimated in the 2020 primaries. He pulls it out. He, in the first 2 years of his administration, I think, governs in an extraordinary way, has achievements through Congress that a lot of people thought were impossible, plays his hand as well as anybody could possibly play it. And I remember when Dean Phillips first jumps in, one of the challenges he has is age was the critique. Right? This is before October 7th and a lot of the fallout that caused, and I think part of what you cover in the book does reveal why he had such trouble communicating and also adjusting. But it was hard to make an argument against Joe Biden, especially in the first 2 years of his term, because it was hard to point to moments where age really had limited his ability to govern. When you look at the legislative achievements, when you look at his response to the pandemic and the economic crisis. So I do think that was part of it too, that a lot of people had felt uncertain about their own judgment, especially in a world where Donald Trump could win and Joe Biden was the only person who could beat him. That who are we to question the people around Joe Biden when he'd been so successful?
Yeah, I mean, you remember during the 2019-2020 Democratic primary when Joe Biden was like, I'm going to be able to negotiate with Mitch McConnell. There were little guffaws from the base of the party, and Joe Biden passed an infrastructure bill with, I think, 19 Senate Republicans. Yeah, don't quote me on that, but and then did an event in early 2023 with Mitch McConnell in Kentucky, and Mitch McConnell called the infrastructure bill a legislative miracle. So you could also imagine how Joe Biden and the people, in his inner circle who had felt underestimated, who had listened to the people laughing at them, were saying, but that also created this insularity where eventually they would not listen to outside critics, even well-intentioned ones.
So America loves an underdog, and Joe Biden has been an underdog throughout his life. And one of the qualities that the American people love about him, admire about him, is his ability to get up off the ground after fate or God or whatever has thrown something horrible at him. Whether it's a debilitating stutter or that horrible car accident that took the life of his wife and daughter and sent his 2 sons to the hospital in 1972, or his brain aneurysms in 1988, and on and on and on. And what makes this a tragedy is that it's that quality that makes it so he can't see when it is actually time to give up, because he has been so determined to fight and achieve and do good things for the country. He's not, I mean, members of his family might be, but he's not trying to enrich himself as president of the United States. And then the other tragedy about this story is that he defined his presidency as a battle for the soul of America, to save America from Trump and Trumpism. And because of those decisions he made to run for re-election and to hide what was happening to him, he delivered the country back into the hands of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and look, this is why, reading your book and just having experienced the last couple of years, I have anger towards Joe Biden. I think I have more anger, especially after reading your book, towards the close group of advisors that kept most of the other White House staff, campaign staff, pollsters, everyone else at bay, and no one thought to themselves, can this guy really do it? Is this a good idea? I thought one of the most shocking revelations in the book for me was you talked to some people who worked for Biden back in 2020, and you write that ahead of the Democratic National Convention in 2020, Biden did a series of Zooms to produce a campaign video of him talking to voters. And one Democrat you talked to said, who was working with the Biden campaign, it was like a different person. This was like watching grandpa who shouldn't be driving. I didn't think he could be president. This was when some top Democrats entered an angry phase. I became disillusioned with the entire apparatus because what I was seeing on this video in 2020, that means people working for him every day see this. Did anyone else tell you that they had concerns as far back as 2020?
A small handful of people who had known him for a long time. One said that the first time that they noticed any sort of deterioration came after his son Beau's tragic death of brain cancer in May 2015. And this person, this top aide, said it was like watching water poured on sand, what happened to Biden's psyche. And then there were people that popped in on him in 2017, 2018, before he ran, who said it seemed as though he'd aged 10 years in one or two. And then in the Hur report, when Robert Hur does his special counsel report on Biden's mishandling of classified information, one of the reasons they conclude that they can't prosecute Biden successfully, even though they conclude he did break the law with the classified information, was not just the interview they did with Biden in October 2023, that the audio of which was released a few weeks ago, but because of the audio, the tapes that they had of Biden talking to his ghostwriter in 2017, 2018, where it sounds like debate Biden, or for want of a better term, non-functioning Biden, where he is not clear on dates, where he's not clear on situations, and he loses his train of thought in a major way. And Alex had great reporting in the book that suggested that aides would privately acknowledge that while COVID was one of the worst things to happen to the United States, it was one of the best things to happen to Joe Biden's presidential campaign in 2020, because he could run from his basement.
I also can't believe that there was no real discussion or debate among Biden and even his broader circle of advisors, senior staff, about running for reelection in 2024, particularly because, he talks about himself in the 2020 campaign, now famously, as, I'm nothing more than a bridge to this generation of new leaders behind me. He also says in 2020, I'm just a transitional candidate. So he doesn't take a one-term pledge, but makes it seem like he may only serve one term. And then I remember thinking to myself, like, is he going to run for re-election? Like, it doesn't seem like. And then we did well in the midterms, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to have a debate about this. But it sounds like there was no real meeting, discussion, anything.
Yeah, I mean, what's sort of shocking is one of the most consequential political decisions, perhaps in American history, is how little process there actually was. And basically, what happened was Joe Biden, who someone close to him said he is nothing if not for this. I mean, it's the guy that had been thinking about being president as soon as he was constitutionally eligible to be president, and that was in 1977. And he basically he wanted to run for re-election. The first lady wanted him to run for re-election. Someone equated Joe Biden, like a longtime advisor, there was this metaphor, he's like a shark. He just has to keep swimming or he'll die. And basically,
men need therapy. And if you're a man here and you're not in therapy, do a favor for your wife. Or husband. Thanks, Jake. Gay-splained to me during fucking Pride.
Somebody needed to gay-splain. I'm sorry. I was right here.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Alex.
But yeah, I mean, Basically, like, Jill said he was going to run. Jill and Hunter were completely on board. And, and we can get into Hunter stuff later if you want to. But, Hunter had obviously, spiraled and I think saw in his dad's presidency and the fight against Trump sort of a chance to redeem himself. And also a way, if we're being honest, to stay out of prison. And I think basically the family decided, and when anybody in the inner circle was like, are we going to talk about this? Are we going to have a real discussion, debate? Word came down from Mike Donnellan, said, president's decided. It's over. And, in fairness, like even those that had concerns, none of them ever got in Joe Biden's face. You could say that's part because of their own, cowardice, or also because of the culture that Biden and the family in particular had created, where dissent or questioning was immediately suspected as disloyalty.
Barack Obama went by the White House in summer 2023 to kind of kick the tires and see if this was a good idea. And at that point, their relationship was strained enough because, as Obama would put it, when people would say to him, is Biden really going to run for re-election? You should talk to him. And he would say, like, he's still pissed at me for backing Hillary in 2016. So their relationship was at the point where Obama didn't feel like he could say, hey, you should think twice about this.
Can I just say about the Hillary thing
I
too?
know.
Like this, because
It's not true.
It's
Yes.
not, well, the timeline on this is also, I think it's confusing for people because the way the story is told, it's like the beginning of the 2016 race, and it's Hillary and Bernie and Joe Biden, and Obama's like, and I pick Hillary, and that's not what happened at all. What happened was Bo dies, and Joe Biden is mourning his son. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton enter the race. They have 6-7 months of campaigning. They have organizations in Iowa.
10 months.
10 months. Okay, 10 months of campaigning.
This is in the book, just so you know. He's not lecturing us. He wants to make sure you know.
Well, because it just gets confusing about like what. And so Joe Biden contemplates in the fall a late entry into the race after Hillary and Bernie had already been campaigning against each other forever and have these big organizations in Iowa, and then goes to Obama and is like, can I jump into the race this late? And Obama's like, well, if you jump into the race this late, probably it's going to help Bernie Sanders win because Hillary and Biden would split the vote of like non-progressives, and also was genuinely concerned. You guys write this in the book, genuinely concerned about him because he was still grieving his son. But that,
it became in Biden's brain. And look, we write about this in the book. This is the Biden mythology, and all politicians have their own mythology. But by 2019, 2020, it had changed into a theology, where there was just this faith, and it's a small cult of people who believed in it. But like all religions, skeptics were not allowed, and this belief and part of this mythology or theology is, Barack didn't back me in 2016, which is also one of the reasons why, although Alex and I differ on why did Biden endorse Kamala so quickly, my version is the more charitable one, which is he's proud of the fact that he picked Kamala Harris to be his vice president, not so much for Kamala Harris, but because of what she represents, and he doesn't want to do to her what he thinks Obama did to him, which, as you note, is not really accurate. It's revisionist history, but that's how he thinks of it.
Well, and I think that what Jake said is true. I just also think that Biden, as he is, fuming, is like, oh, you're going to kick me out, you get Kamala. Like you're not going to be able to get the open process that you guys want, that Obama wants, that Pelosi wants. Like I get to choose who it is, and also I'm going to show what it means to really be loyal to my vice president.
This is one of the few areas of disagreement. There's Word versus Google Docs. Yeah. This is what motivates him, and we've learned in our San Francisco leg of the tour, he thinks that The Rock is a good movie. These are.
Oh, I'm with Alex.
What
on
kind
that.
of
Thank you. Thank you.
What kind of a feat opinion is that The Rock is not a good movie? What?
Man, the people are with me, Jake.
What a ridiculous statement.
But I will say, and you guys saw this, that resentment toward Obama, and all of
Yeah,
our reporting.
we got some of that too.
Well, this like you remember in 2019, Biden would not appear on Pod Save America. I think every Democrat running for president appeared on Pod Save America. Every Democrat appeared on the Axe Files with former Obama advisor David Axelrod. Joe Biden didn't. Yeah. And I mean, I think he did in the general election.
Yeah, we got him.
But
We got it. Well, whenever Joe Biden comes on Pod Save America, he does win.
1-1.
There is one Biden aide said to us that when he's talking about the elites, he's talking about Obama.
Yeah, which it's sad, and I don't like.
Not just
it makes me
Obama. He's
sad.
probably talking about us too. But
Yeah,
I'm just
but
saying, like, Obama is definitely in his brain when
So,
he's thinking that.
Here's the other thing I've always wondered too. Like, so he decides he's going to run again, and I think a lot of people are like, well, why didn't the Democratic Party do something? Why didn't someone get involved? Did you guys, in your reporting, hear anything about other potential candidates in 2024? Like, were some of them getting ready? Were they thinking about it? Because honestly, like, they are as responsible. Like, someone would have had to run against him. And we would always, because people like our staff was like, why is Joe Biden the one? And other people, and I'd be like, look, someone's got to run against him. You know, and Dean
Well,
Phillips
credit to
ended
you
up
guys.
doing.
You guys interviewed Dean Phillips. Like
Yep.
MSNBC would not even have Dean Phillips on. You guys like did a tough, like, good interview with him.
Yeah, and was not. And look, and we were. During that interview, I was like, well, I get why someone is running against Joe Biden. It didn't seem like he had, and he did it. And in fairness to Dean Phillips, he was like, look, no one else would do it.
Yeah.
He tried to get Whitmer, Pritzker, Newsom, Bashir. He tried to get them to run. Some of them wouldn't even take his call. Bill Daley, Obama's former chief of staff, former Clinton Commerce secretary, he tried to get people to run. Nobody would do it. You know, there isn't a very long, proud history of people challenging incumbent presidents and defeating them in primaries. Usually what happens is, Ted Kennedy being the one exception, usually you go off into disgrace.
Right.
People still, though, were mad at Ted Kennedy for for decades. Well, it felt like centuries for blaming him for weakening Jimmy Carter. So Ronald, I mean, it's stupid. It's as revisionist, but there were candidates that were up until the end of 2023 watching to see if Joe Biden was actually going to go through with this, and there were maybe 5 or 6 that could have, on a dime, put a campaign together. I think Newsom, Harris, Whitmer, Buttigieg, maybe Pritzker. Am I forgetting anything?
Yeah, I mean, there was
and Klobuchar. They could have, but nobody was going to do it
did it.
against him.
Yeah, there was sort of a just-in-case primary like going on. I mean, you had Pritzker and Newsom like cutting checks for like the Charleston, South Carolina mayoral race in 2023. I'm sure it was completely just good intention out of the kindness of their hearts to get involved in those races. And yeah, there was quietly everyone was positioning, and it got to the point actually in early 2024 where Biden campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon actually starts calling some of the governors and be like, and feels like they're sort of subtly trying to undermine Biden.
She hears that Governor Healy of Massachusetts is talking up Whitmer.
Yeah.
And O'Malley Dillon gets mad about it. I will say, though, something that is very specific to where we are as a country right now is, first of all, there is very little incentive for courage built into our politics. People are all about the base and all about not rocking the boat. Second of all, parties are so weak right now. This is a smart crowd, so I'm not gonna ask. Can you name who was DNC chair during the Biden presidency? Jamie Harrison. But I had to beat you to it. But this was not somebody who was brought in because he was going to be able to tell Joe Biden some hard truths.
Well, there's a Maura Healey. I think it's a way to get from that to some of the larger lessons that we should take forward from this, other than to probably not nominate Joe Biden in 2028, which I think we're all
Settled.
pretty good on.
He's going to resent Pod Save America even more now.
Yeah, but
You joke about that. They still, to this day, Biden and his top aides say that he could have won, could have beaten Trump, and he could serve as president until January 2029.
I just think that's sad. And
They still argue that point.
But I think this gets at what I was going to point at from the book, which is you have this. There's a moment with Maura Haley where she's walking out of the White House, and she says to Ricchetti, "I'd love to see the polling," and he's like, "I know polling." And I believe it's directly to you as a quote where she says, "There's no chessboard." To paraphrase, there's no one pulling the strings behind the scenes. There was just one old man and his enablers who refused to do the right thing. That's basically what she says. And that was sort of as I'm reading the book, I was like, oh my God, everyone was feeling the same way. Everyone had these questions. If you saw Joe Biden once at his worst, you thought, is this a strange aberrance? Am I seeing something that no one else is seeing? I'm being reassured. And it's not just people that are seeing him at town halls. It's governors. It's senators. There was nobody making there was no grand decision being made. There was no DNC making machinations. It was just a bunch of people kind of fuddling along, making the best decisions they thought they needed to make each day, leading us to this kind of cataclysm.
And the reason why they began increasingly shielding him from governors is to make people say, oh, it was just a one-off. It must have just been sort of a bad day, bad hour. And they were gaslighting, not just like the public and reporters, but they were gaslighting their own members and leaders of the Democratic Party, members of their own cabinet.
Yeah, and they were one of the things we learned we learned so much while researching this book, but one of the things we learned is they weren't just hiding Biden from the world, they were hiding the world from Biden. And when we talk to his pollsters, they are, in my view, some of the most moving and alarming sections of the book have to do with these three pollsters. Most pollsters don't work in the White House. Pollsters always work outside of the White House. And the campaign had somebody that did data, but then there were also these three pollsters, three of the best in the
Great
business.
pollsters.
Yeah, Jeff Guerin, and Molly Murphy and Jeffrey Pollack, and they had data, and they couldn't ever bring it to the president, which is crazy. But they would bring it to Donnellan and Ricchetti, and then Donnellan and Ricchetti would put it through the Donnellan and Ricchetti-izer and present it to Joe Biden.
It's a landslide, boss.
They told the New Yorker that they genuinely believe that polling is broken now, and so polling doesn't matter, even though they had polling that was telling them bad things.
And when David Plouffe came in after Biden had dropped out, and he saw the actual polling and saw that not only were they going to lose all of the battleground states, and by a lot, but they were on track to lose Minnesota and
Virginia.
Colorado and Virginia and New Mexico, I think, was on the bubble, and New Hampshire, and it would have been a bloodbath. And whatever you think of Kamala Harris, she at least brought the party to treading water. And so it was a bad night, but it wasn't just a complete wipeout.
The Trump campaign believes they would have potentially a 57 seat majority in the Senate if it had not been for Kamala Harris top ticket.
It's 53 right now, just for people who are normal.
So, since the book, you guys have taken a lot of shit from both the right and Democrats, Biden supporters. On the right,
Oh boy, read the tweets, baby.
well, I'm confused about this because they have accused the Trump media folks have accused you guys of being part of the cover-up. That
Just
you write
Jake,
about.
actually.
It's
Yeah,
just
just
Jake.
me.
It's
It's
mostly
not
Jake.
Alex.
It
It's
is
not
mostly
Alex.
Jake. It is
It's
mostly
just
Jake.
me.
But most of the information in the book you found out after the election. B, before the election, people who spent time around Biden either wouldn't talk to reporters or wouldn't tell reporters the truth. So what was the media, not just you two, but the media? I mean, Alex, you won an award at the Correspondents' Dinner, and even you said this is a story we all
my family's
missed.
here.
And I thought that was, I was like, I don't know that you guys necessarily missed the story because there wasn't a story to get if the people who could tell the story refused to tell it.
I think so. A few different points on that. I think there is a difference between, while a lot of right-wing media was right to be skeptical, of Biden's abilities, there's a big difference between showing on a loop him stumbling up the stairs of Air Force One and doing behind-the-scenes reporting. I also said I thought we missed a lot of the story, in part because Jake and I had just done this book, and I was like, holy shit, there was a lot that I didn't know. Now, that being said, I do think, in particular for reporting and reporters, a hinge moment is after Robert Hur's report in early 2024, in which he basically decides not to prosecute Joe Biden because he says the jury would not convict such an old man with a bad memory. And if you look at the coverage, I think the White House comms team, props to them, they did a very good job. But I think if you look at the coverage, it was not skeptical enough. And I think I think the fairest critique is really those 4 or 5 months before the debate, when after the special counsel report, I think that's when I think you can really, I think, objectively argue the media did not do a good enough job.
Yeah. What about you?
I mean, I think
I had to watch Megyn Kelly yell at you for a while on that show. I was like, what?
I think
You actually didn't have to.
I think that the conservative media, we discovered while we were reporting this, was right to be skeptical of his acuity from the beginning, from 2019, because our reporting suggested that it was an issue as far back as 2015. And so, when I get new information, I change my mind, which is not, I think, a difficult thing for mature adults to do.
Yeah.
You'd be
So
surprised.
I have no problem acknowledging that the skepticism in 2019, 2020 about his acuity was correct. I thought he was aging. I didn't see acuity issues at that time. I was mistaken. The tone and tenor of some of the criticism, I think, is rooted in the fact that a lot of these same people said that when Obama took office, he was a secret Muslim, that the new Black Panthers were going to take over the country, that Hillary was going to die in 2016, that the election was stolen in 2020, and on and on and on.
I mean, the current president, just a couple days ago, shared a post that said actually Biden was executed in 2020, and it was a body double the entire time.
And by the way, we should have paid more for that body double.
Thank you.
Can we not get if we're going to replace the guy? This guy, we got a used body double.
Do you have anything in Orion Reynolds?
Yeah, something new off the lot here.
So I think that they are and they were right about this. And now, again, as Alex says, there's a difference
Broken
between
clock,
Well, there's a difference between calling him an applesauce head and laughing at him and saying he needs a sippy cup and showing these clips on a loop and doing investigative reporting. But that said, because of what you mentioned, it took a lot to do investigative reporting on this. And even if you go back and read some of the pieces that really were shocking at the time, Peter Baker wrote one in 2023 about Biden how much rest they built into his schedule in terms of trips. Alex's incredible scoops about Biden's schedule. The Wall Street Journal reporters Siobhan Hughes and Annie Linsky, even if you go back and read those incredibly important stories that were very difficult and brought a lot of criticism to the reporters, they're nothing compared to what we found out after the election was over and people felt like, okay, I don't have to worry about helping to elect Trump. He already won, so now I can unburden myself.
I'd also add to that, the American people had made up their decision on Joe Biden's age. They had decided he was too old to seek re-election.
They decided that in 2022.
But so to the idea that this is something that wasn't in front of people, that wasn't
Right.
a big subject of discussion, it was one of the most important debates. We were talking about it on Pod Save America all the time. How does he address this liability? He's failing to address it. And the weeks after the debate, it was shocking, not just the performance in the debate, but that the obvious solution is him going out there and over again, was not one they were taking advantage of. And it's really chilling to read in the book that that's not a demand being made just from people on the outside. Chuck Schumer is asking that. Different senators are asking that.
And Schumer concludes that he's not doing it because he can't.
Now, I'm sorry to do this, and because I do think we have some audio that I think is important to play, and I think it is an indictment of you personally. Jake, speaking
I know what this is. Okay.
Speaking of Chuck Schumer, I did listen to part of the book in the car. I did some on the text, but some
I'm excited for
in
this.
the car. Can we just play a little bit of the audio version of Original Sin?
I'm urging you not to run. Do you think Kamala can win? Biden asked. I don't know if she can win, Schumer said. I just know that you cannot. Biden said that he needed a week. They stood. On their way out, Biden put his hands on Schumer's shoulders. You have bigger balls than anyone I've ever met, Biden told him.
You did a voice?
What the fuck
Multiple
was that?
voices. Wow. I screwed up. I should have listened to the audio version.
I don't even know how it's possible that your impression of Chuck Schumer is anti-Semitic. You're a Jewish man. You're from Philadelphia.
I will tell you, wherever I go on this book tour, people come and they say, I'm listening to the book on tape and I love your impressions. That is the God's honest truth.
This is actually the first time I have heard that.
Yeah, me too.
And
I
that,
thought it was good.
Also, you did a
that
Biden
Chuck
too. I
Schumer
didn't
could
know-
use some mark.
the Biden.
I was holding back because I didn't want it to be full anti-Semitic.
Yeah, that's right.
You went half.
Just slightly.
You went half. Okay.
Unbelievable.
I'm Jewish, in case
he's
people don't know
Jewish,
this.
he's
Jewish. She's
And
Jewish.
very
Jewish.
proud of it, and if you have a
Proud
problem with
Jewish.
that, you can leave.
I'll do a last question that's based on the criticism that you guys have gotten from a lot of Democrats. This is criticism we get whenever we talk about it, which is, why is this still relevant now? And leave the guy alone, you know, leave the past in the past, and let's focus on the current president, who at least half the country would argue is more unfit than Joe Biden, albeit for different reasons. What do you guys say to that?
I mean, I would say this is part of the reason why the Democratic Party is in the situation it's in. I mean, anytime there was any coverage about age, whether or not I brought it up or Jake brought it up, it was, what about Trump? And, you know, reporting is about holding up a mirror. And the Democratic Party can either look in the mirror and recognize this is part of the reason they lost, that, you know, while they rightly mock Republicans for trashing Trump in private and then going out there and saying he is the most ethical, bestest president in his American history, you know, they were doing the exact same thing when they were trotting out, being like, Biden is sharp, he's running circles around us, he is so engaged, you wouldn't even believe it. All you had to do is be in the meetings. And it just wasn't true. So I guess, you know, Democrats, if they want, I have no idea if the Democratic Party, if the voters are actually going to engage with the content of this book, but reporting is just about trying to hold up that mirror in front of people, and whether or not they look in is up to them.
So I have 2 points on this. First of all, it just happened. The debate wasn't even a year ago. It was June of last year. I mean, it just happened. When were you supposed to write books?
Yeah, by the way, also, I learned here tonight that you did the book proposal on November 6th. You are sick.
Yeah.
You're a sick man.
I have problems. The other point I would make, it's true, I'm very driven. I'm crazy. I agree. I'm
He
not,
cares
That's
too much.
cool.
That's his
I
biggest
can-
weakness.
right. That's my. Oh, this. Okay, quick. Obama aside, because
no.
this is my. No, this is a good Obama story. This is one of my favorite Obama stories. It's one of the first debates in 2007 or 2008,
Yeah.
and it's like Hillary, John Edwards, and Obama, and they're asked, "What is your biggest fault?" And Obama goes first, and he's like, "Well, I'm really messy. A messy desk. It's a real problem." And then John Edwards is like, I care so much about people.
The voices.
I really, really, it's a problem. I really care about the American. And then Hillary's like, I work so hard. I work so hard for
good
the
answer.
American people. And then Obama's like, wait a second, I didn't think we were giving answers like that. I thought we were supposed to really answer the question. The best Obama moment ever.
And then he would tell that story on the stump for like the next couple weeks. It was like a great laugh line on the stump.
The other thing I would say in response to the why aren't you covering Trump? I cover Trump every day for 2 hours, still even on the road. But beyond that, so I don't know how many of you have gone to New York to see Good Night and Good Luck. If you haven't yet, it's great. If you haven't yet, CNN is actually going to show it on Saturday night on CNN, and you should see it because it's really good. They're doing a live broadcast of the play. But at the very end of the whole play takes place in 1954. It's Murrow and McCarthy and all that. At the very end, there is like the one thing that's not said in 1954 is there's this montage of video clips of television news. And you know, there's like the moon landing and JFK getting assassinated and all these things. And at the end of this montage, it's maybe, I don't even know, 5-10 minutes, something like that. It goes like that. But at the end of it, you see Republicans lying about the 2020 election on cable, and then you see Democrats lying about Biden's acuity on cable. And I asked Clooney for an interview I did when we did the New Yorker excerpt of the book, just to give like a little special something for the New Yorker. I asked Clooney to weigh in. Why did you put that in? Obviously, George Clooney played a role in all of this when he wrote his op-ed calling for Biden to drop out. And he said it's important that we call that out too, the people vouching for Biden, because we have to speak truth to power no matter who's in power. And I said, well, what do you tell people who say, what about Trump? He said, how do you think we got Trump?
Yeah. I mean, look, from a perspective of, a couple Democrats who want Democrats to win again, like you cannot tell people that what they are seeing and what they are hearing isn't true. And it wasn't just over the last 4 years. It was a Biden thing with the age. Like it was also about inflation and costs and someone would say, oh, gas prices are high. And then someone would say, oh, well, you just took that picture in front of a gas station where the prices are always high. And it's like, I get that can be frustrating. Like I've been on the other side of it. I've, worked in the White House and yelled at reporters, maybe you guys. But like at some point, the voters get to decide, and you have to listen to the voters, because if you do not listen to the voters, you cannot get the votes you need to take power. It seems very simple, but it is something that we have, at least some parts of the party have forgotten.
I mean, I think it's a lesson of this book that there's an old expression that Washington is often the last to get the news, and the Democratic Party, and very much including and especially the Biden White House, did not want to respect or listen to their own voters. And I think you could also argue that the Democratic Party has not listened or totally respected their voters in the last 3 presidential primaries. And some of the argument has been, well, we don't want a divisive primary because Hillary was hurt by Bernie. You guys know, probably the most divisive Democratic primary in recent American history was your guys's. And Obama entered with 60 Democratic Senate seats. Divisive primaries allow for debate and for voters to decide who the strongest candidate is. They're not inherently bad.
I would argue that the last time the Democratic Party, when on the presidential level, listened to its voters was 2008.
What about 2020?
And what about 2020?
2020?
I don't know. In 2020, the party, so just to remind folks, Buttigieg won Iowa, Bernie won New Hampshire, Bernie won Nevada, Joe Biden won South Carolina, and then there was this uprising of Obama and the party influencers to get everybody out of the race except for Joe Biden so that they could beat Bernie, because they were terrified Bernie was going to be the nominee. And they did that. I'm not here to advocate for Bernie Sanders, but and obviously it worked out the way the Democrats wanted it to work out. But the last time Democrats actually, in 2012 doesn't really count because it's an incumbent, but the last time there was an open process and the Democrats said, okay, go. Obama, Hillary, Edwards, whoever, Biden, Chris Dodd, whatever. Like, and the voters did a pretty good job.
Well, the voters also I mean, look, yes, but voters chose Joe Biden in that primary in 2020. I think there's some truth in what you're saying, but I will also say there was another moment when I feel like what we saw was a kind of the voters having their say in a way, and a kind of moment where you saw how the Democratic Party is very different than the Republican Party, which is after that debate. Because I do think there's a part of this story that is, I think, even though it did not end the way we had all hoped, is inspiring, which is in the wake of that debate, what you saw is people willing to tell the truth about what they saw and the importance of making a change. You have leading Democrats going to Joe Biden, asking him to step aside. You have these incredible moments, which you report on in the book, of members of Congress trying to speak directly to Joe Biden about this, not liking what they're hearing, not accepting no for an answer. You have people on the outside talking about this. You have a real and genuine moment of a group of people coming together and saying, hey, for the good of the country, this guy has to step aside because Trump is an existential threat. And it may not have ended in Kamala being president, but it did, I think, speak to me, like the values you're trying to say we didn't evince before when people were getting behind Joe Biden.
We belatedly got there.
I would say they get half credit. I mean, I think your point is well taken that if Donald Trump had like showed serious signs of decline or whatever that and had that similar debate, I grant the point that a lot of Republican lawmakers would not have the courage to finally speak out and say something.
He tried to steal an election and stage an insurrection in the Capitol.
And
they're like, all right,
they had
let's do
24 hours of courage in the wake of it. All I'm saying is, I think what I take away from it is there was no one in charge. There was no one making the decision. We were kind of sleepwalking towards disaster. And then after that debate, we woke up. And the question is now, how do we make sure we stay awake and are honest about challenges the Democratic Party faces?
Granted, I was just going to add, though, I don't think you get like points for courage when you only do it because you now believe you might lose.
Alex, I thought we were going to lose for months.
Then we just knew it after the debate.
I think that Alex and I have a slightly less positive review of Democrats, and I'll just tell you why. Can anybody here guess how many Democratic governors called for Biden to drop out of the race after the debate? One. Governor Healy of Massachusetts. How many Democratic senators? One. Senator Welch of Vermont. I mean, it wasn't an outpouring of courage. It was a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering because people didn't want to come across as jerks. The House members were braver.
Yeah.
And they're the lowest on the totem pole in Washington.
We thought we were going insane. We were like, what is happening? Did we miss something?
Well, that was what was so surprising, right? Because we're talking about it and we're getting a lot of blowback online, but privately hearing from a lot of people being like, thank you guys for saying, I'm glad you guys are out there saying this. We need people out there saying this.
And then
the other thing I would say is that the argument is about whether or not he should be the nominee, but the truth of the matter is our reporting suggests that he could not be an effective president 24/7, which is what the job requires. And there's only one elected Democratic official that I know of, and that's Congresswoman Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez in Washington State, who actually said he shouldn't be the nominee, and to be honest, he probably shouldn't be president either.
Yeah. And although you said too in the book, this also shocked me, that out of the 200 plus people you guys talked to, there were very few who actually thought he could serve out a second term, which that means that would include senior White House staff, campaign staff, who told you that they did not think he could serve.
Yeah, they were like, the plan was to get to November 5th and figure it out later. I mean, we had one longtime Biden aide that, I mean, that was, I mean, if the right wing sometimes refers to, the Trump derangement syndrome, mocking Democrats that I think actually very sincerely are opposed to Trump's agenda. But if you continue the metaphor, the biggest symptom is publicly telling everyone that Joe Biden could be president for another 4 years. And the people knew that he could not do the job he was running for, but there was such fear of Trump that they said, let's go. And longtime Biden people basically felt that eventually, if he had won, there would have eventually been some sort of constitutional crisis because clearly the people around him were not willing to cede power.
But tell them. So we always say that we almost all the interviews of the more than 200 we did for the book were after the election. We have to put in this stupid almost because of this one interview that Alex did with somebody. Tell them what they told you.
I mean, they were honest. It was a longtime Biden aide, and they said all he had to do was win, and then only had to show proof of life every once in a while.
Let's. I feel like I want to end on a light moment from the book. Which is it's a small.
We have another clip.
Yeah, no, this is a small moment, but
We didn't even play my Obama, which is really good.
That is true. His Obama is good. Not because I've listened, but because he
Hello,
does
Joe.
it all the time.
save it for the sequel. But the
The return of Hunter.
You can do the voiceover for the second volume of Promised Land for Obama when he does it.
But so the debate happens, and how does it come to be that Doug Emhoff is watching the debate with Rob Reiner, and then the debate ends, Rob Reiner, furious, starts berating Doug Emhoff?
Poor Doug.
Well, I think it was more that that Rob Reiner, who is a very excitable fella, was just screaming, and he seemed to be yelling at Emhoff, and he said, "We're going to lose our fucking democracy because of you." And Emhoff thought, "Because of me?"
Because of sweet Doug? We can all agree that Doug is not to blame.
Well,
Okay, that has to be it.
That's it. Doug Emhoff. Now, Jake, Alex, thank you so much.
Thank
Everyone
you.
go buy Original Sin.